In continued efforts to understand the industry in which we function, its needs and requirements, and the changes driving product development and innovation daily, the BBA is kicking off a series of face-to-face roundtable events with a panel discussion around innovation and leadership, the evolving responsibility of test and certification data within the construction innovation roadmap. I'd like us to consider the identification of industry blockers associated with digitisation in product development and ways for the industry to overcome them. Now, to kick off, I'd like to first turn to Amanda. Amanda Long, you are the Chief Exec at the Code for Construction Product Information, or CCPI. Is this an industry-wide problem, or does it affect certain sectors only? And either way, does it need a collective effort to overcome them?
It's definitely an industry-wide problem. I think that would be fair to say. And I think there are various blockers, but for me, the absolute key one is the need for culture change. The sector is slow to change, despite the fact that we're seeing, and we've seen on the building safety agenda following the Grenfell tragedy, the need for culture change and leadership on putting builder safety first and engaging with major hazard safety has been loud and clear in the public narrative now for 3 or 4 years. Dame Judith Hackett has been calling for it, very clearly saying get ahead of regulation, you need to start putting building safety first. In parallel, there's the net zero, the carbon agenda, again, a major piece around culture change required there. And when it comes to digitisation, the whole understanding of what the golden thread is, what an intelligent information system really is, what it means, the ability for the industry to think about the future, whole life of products and having data that's accessible not just for 5 years, but for 20 years within a project. And the whole piece within culture about confidence in data and data sharing. Can't avoid that part of culture changes as well. So I'd wrap it all up in this industry has got a very substantial set of demands on it as culture change is a big blocker for this industry, and I'd put it out there for others to comment on that one. You did ask for possible ways of solving it,
yes.
and I would naturally point to the Code for Construction Product Information and also the Building Safer Future Charter, which I'm also responsible for, and Consider It Constructs scheme, which I'm also responsible for. All three of those organisations put leadership and culture change as core to a gateway and engagement piece with them. So we can help you with it. It can be done. It must be done, and it's not being done.
Right, okay, well, let me first turn then to respond to that. Nigel Blacklock, you are Technical Director at Bowder. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think if I take, sometimes it's to do with terminology, is that if we look at the construction industry, it is a dinosaur, I think, in relation to many other industries. And we had an example where we took something from another industry, which was BIM. Now, in the end, most people don't know what the letters stand for, and actually, it's actually quite unhelpful. And I think the word digitisation is a far better term, and people are starting to get used to that. But they haven't always made the connection that BIM and digitisation and also just computer-readable data. And one of the areas that I think there's certain parts of construction that have moved on with that, whereas the manufacturers are still quite a long way behind. There was quite a lot of work done by some early on, but then it just was like somebody switched the light off. Part of it was in waiting for the dictionaries to be created. I'm actually on the European Committee on BIM, where I can see that one of the things they were trying to deal with is what I refer to as the Tower of Babel, where it was where you may be talking about the same thing, but you may be coming at different angles. So you need to make sure that you all agree on what the dictionary definition of that word or item is. So that's actually taken quite a long time to put in place, and we're now seeing the benefits of that. So it is a new time to reinvigorate that, but I think the word should be digitisation, and let's actually lose the old term because it didn't seem to fully fly. So it is something, though, that the construction manufacturers' part was and is slow on.
Well, actually, I know others are eager to make their points, but actually let me pick up on that then, because actually I'm going to refer to a very recent report in The Manufacturer that stated in UK manufacturing, of the SMEs across all 5 manufacturing sectors that have gone fully digital, more than 50% of respondents pointed out it saved them money, it improved morale, increased revenue, but, and this comes back perhaps to Amanda's point, one of the barriers to adopting digital, mentioned by, again, just about 50% of respondents, was resistance by leadership. So I'm going to ask James about that one. James Biggs, you're head of technical at Berkeley Homes. Have you experienced this resistance in construction in particular?
I think a great question and observation, and one that's quite complex. And I think to go back to the start and refer back to culture is very prudent at this point, because we have to sort of recognise that those that are leading the industry typically are those who are trained when mobiles weren't around, social media wasn't around. So we've seen a huge shift in social expectation for those that are and have built successful businesses who have tried and tested methods of responding to legislative change. You know, there's a grace period and a change is introduced, and they have an opportunity to learn how to overcome that challenge through that grace period of legislation change. Post Grenfell, we are now trying to educate an industry, leaders at all levels, to try and think more dynamically and respond to something before it's enforced. And therefore that requires far more collaborative working, a bit of guesstimation of what direction we think it's going and how we can get ahead of that. So there are some challenges that, as you are maybe younger in the industry in your career, you've got these lots of ideas of how you're going to change the world, but when you're accountable for a business and those that are employed who have mortgages to pay, there are bigger risks to factor in your decision making as a business leader, that you can't jump in with 2 feet without some element of risk assessment, for fear that the business will go under.
This is true. I mean, I think we all understand those risks, but again, this comes back to this point about can we afford not to? Let me bring in Anna. Anna Scothen, you are of course from the National Home Improvement Council, Chief Executive. What would you say?
Yeah, I don't think that we are dinosaurs. I think that the construction sector is, by its very nature, a sector that solves problems. Things need building, repairing, maintaining, and we do it. I think the challenge that we have now, the problem that we find ourselves in, is that we are so used to talking to ourselves, we're just in an echo chamber and we don't naturally have the answer. So I think that we need to start talking to the disruptors, the innovators in digital, the world of data and digital and innovation, and bring them in and say, we've got these problems, we've got these opportunities for because the technology exists. Other people are doing it in other sectors, and I think we're trying to solve a problem with our construction mindset, and actually we need to recognise what we don't know, and great leaders recognise what they don't know and they bring somebody in that does know that bit. And I think we need to open up the table and say, come in and talk to us and help us realise these opportunities and help us solve these challenges.
Okay, well let me then pass across to someone who does come from the sci-tech background, literally. John Leake, what are your thoughts?
Just reflecting on the comments that you made, Neil, about the challenges within the manufacturing sector. And I know through the Made Smarter programme that has gone sort of UK-wide, one of the key challenges has been this whole thing about kind of leadership in that digital transformation. And I suppose you're kind of asking people who are, time-served engineers, manufacturing background, suddenly to become pioneers in digital transformation. That's a bit of a big ask. And it's interesting, if I look at what the way that they approach that particular challenge in that sector is actually through a coordinated leadership and management course. Because actually it's almost like you need to get the leaders together to talk about their own experiences, the challenges that they're facing, maybe with the senior management team or the workforce at large. And perhaps that's something that the construction industry should think about in terms of bringing the people together, where there's almost creating that safe environment where people can share some of their concerns and their issues and challenges. I think the other thing to think about in terms of kind of the industry blockers is actually you're going to need to bring in people with digital expertise into the sector. And how do you do that? Everybody, of course, is after the next generation of digital talent. So you're going to be competing with the likes of the Amazons and the Googles and the Apples and the Betfreds and so on for the best of the talent there. And actually bringing people who've got a data science or an AI background is one thing, but actually they don't have a knowledge and understanding of the construction sector, then actually that may not be the right solution. And therefore perhaps this is about looking at how can you upskill people who already have that domain knowledge, if you like, within the sector, and taking those on a journey in terms of improving their level of understanding about data science, about AI, and how can those sort of tools and technologies be applied into the industry, and they start to become, your homegrown, your own pioneers, if you like.
Right. Well, I know everyone around the table, I'm sure, wants to come back on that. So let me first then come to my right, to Hardy. Hardy Geezer here from the BBA. What would you say to John's points?
Thanks, Neil. So just coming back to the point of digital blockers, sometimes blockers aren't blockers per se, but they're lack of enablers. And if I look at the information that the BBA has made available over the last 50 plus years, it ends up in a PDF, which is a wealth of information, 20, 30, 40 pages of information in every product, but it's actually very difficult to access. So in the past, we've always seen ourselves as generators of content and data. And in future, we want to see ourselves as generators, but also distributors. So if you see two different audiences, if you look at an architect using design software, and then if you, as a contrast to that, look at a contractor on a building site, their needs for information and the means by which they will access that information will be vastly different. But we present the information in one format and presume that to be fit for purpose for multiple audiences. So we need to change to make that available and then see how people use that and how we can develop that offering further.
Okay, well, let me bring in Neil Gibbons from Cross. I think he wanted to add to this.
Yeah, I think we've just had a major disruptor affect all of us. For 2 years, we've become far more able to use technology and look at things in different ways. We had a huge step forward in the fire safety world in the 1990s when smoke detectors became available very cheaply, very effectively, and we saw the number of fire deaths in the UK drop from 1,000 until last year just around about 300. I don't think any other public service or any other area of safety have seen such a positive with the use of technology. But to move us forward, we're making buildings much more complicated, we're putting more risk into building from a fire perspective, but the ability to share learning as we're developing is absolutely crucial, and that's where Cross fits into the equation.
Okay. We're putting risk into buildings. Simon, I'm going to bring in Simon Ayres to come back on that one. You are CEO of Trustmark. What would you say?
I would agree completely that we are now, by sort of introducing renewable technologies alone, creating massive risk in buildings. We are talking about lithium batteries being stored in buildings now, which are a real issue for the fire and rescue service. But I actually, the point I'd like to make is I think we also have to go back when we talk about blockers. Trustmark as an organisation deals with virtually all the areas of work undertaken in and around the home. Each of those businesses are buying product from merchants, from different outlets. I would really ask that we stop just looking at it as selling a box out of an outlet, that there is responsibility taken from the manufacturing down to help people understand the digital need to move forward. That we still go into a builder's merchant and you buy something, you get something. There is no encouragement to move to the future. There is no move to take people on this journey. So I think, we all have a responsibility to unblock. And I think, the secret here is about education, and it's taking people on that journey. But let's get it underway. Let's stop talking about it and get on with it.
Well, let's just get on with it, Nigel. What would you say to that?
Well, I just want to come back to the last points there, is that there are a number of routes to market. And so merchants is one way. Many manufacturers in the roofing industry actually sell systems. And for the reasons I gave earlier on, is the fact that we have a product design and quality of installation factor. And so if we can control those, that is a better way to go. I would meet with what you're asking for. What I would say to you is probably in the last 3 years, the amount of business that's come to this way of doing it and away from what I'll call the mix and match has been huge. So it does demonstrate that people are seeing the advantage of something that's been available for a while, but people realise now actually that's the way we need to do it.
We've only got time for a couple more quick points, so let me take the first of those from Bill. Bill Hewlett, you are here from the BBA. What would you like to say?
But a couple of pieces that I see are missing and I'd like to see. One is brand. When we have a completed building, with possible exception of one or two, the very few that are branded. When you look at a building, is it an Audi, is it a BMW, is it a Mercedes, or is it Jaguar, whatever it is. And if you go to automotive, completely different field. Now, I think one of the things that enables is it allows those manufacturers to, as it were, go it alone. They can do their own thing. We're all bound into a very complex picture, and if you try and disrupt it a little bit, the pressures that bring you back to centre are enormous. The other thing is we're moving into a service industry. The service is to provide space that's dry, warm, sustainable, and so forth. That's a very different picture from being a building or construction industry. It's a service industry. And I think that certainly moves engineers like myself from being people who control solutions to being people who contribute to solutions. So there's a different mindset there. But most importantly, it leads to the need for diversity in the industry. And I think that's a hugely big challenge. So those are perhaps some slightly left field takes on the question.
Not really. No, thank you very much indeed. So I'm going to have to close off this topic at this stage by just turning back to Amanda, who opened it for us. Amanda, what were your thoughts?
Well, it's moved on a little bit, but I really did want to pick up on Anna's comment, because I think the learning from other sectors is totally key in this. We're seeing with the Building Safer Future Charter, with the Champions process, we worked with aviation, chemicals, oil and gas, nuclear, to bring in their expertise on culture change in relation to hazard safety, major hazard safety, building safety for this sector, and we've put that together with construction minds to come up with tools that help this industry engage with this culture change piece in that area, and I think that applies across digitisation. Bringing that expertise from other sectors works, and we're seeing that now at the Building Safer Future Charter. So it's something that I think we need to do more of.
Okay, learning from other industries. Thank you all very much indeed for your time.